She's the reason our family failed. The mic screeched. The entire ballroom froze. Hundreds of eyes turned toward the stage as my father, Harold Whittaker, stood under the golden arch of roses, gripping my wrist like I was some kind of criminal. His voice thundered across the speakers, distorted and cruel. Before we begin, drop a comment and tell us what would you do in this situation? Be honest, tell me in the comments below. We read every comment. Let's begin. My heels scraped against the floor as he yanked me onto the platform, right beside my sister Olivia, who stood in her custom Vera Wang gown, jaw tight with barely concealed amusement. She destroyed this family, he shouted, breathing heavy. You all see her standing here pretending to celebrate Olivia, but don't be fooled. She's nothing but a shame. A curse. Gasps. Awkward laughter. Some stifled snickers. Glasses clinked down. Forks paused in midair. I felt 300 pairs of eyes on me. Judging. Mocking. My mother, Vivian, stood near the champagne tower with my Aunt Deborah, quietly nodding in agreement. My cousins, all dressed like they walked out of a Pinterest board, covered their mouths as they giggled. I saw Aunt Lydia lean to her husband and whisper something. He laughed out loud. Olivia didn't even blink. She just took a step back and folded her arms, as if she'd been waiting for this exact scene. I could barely breathe. But I wasn't surprised. I wasn't even shocked. This wasn't the first time my father had publicly humiliated me, but it would be the last. I swallowed hard, looked at all of them. Then quietly, calmly, I said into the mic, "You'll all regret this." There was a beat of silence. Confused glances. Olivia raised an eyebrow. My dad scoffed. And then, the grand entrance doors burst open. The wind swept in hard and loud, carrying with it the scent of rain and fresh air and something else. Power. A tall man in a black tailored suit stepped in. His walk was silent, smooth, effortless. His presence swallowed the room. My father's face drained of color. My mother dropped her wine glass. Olivia blinked in confusion. Because the man who walked in wasn't just anyone. He was Jackson Hale, the billionaire entrepreneur who had vanished from the public eye for nearly 2 years. And he walked straight toward me. The music had stopped. You could hear the rustling of gowns, the breathless hush of 1,000 unsaid things. Jackson reached me, pulled me gently into his arms, kissed my hand, looked up at the crowd, and then said, loud and clear, "This woman is my wife." The silence shattered into chaos. Olivia dropped her bouquet. My father's mouth hung open like a broken hinge. Aunt Lydia swayed. Someone caught her, and the whispers turned into a storm. Wait, what? No way, she married Jackson Hale? That's impossible. When? How? Jackson's eyes never left mine. He turned back to the crowd, his voice calm, sharp as glass. I've spent the last year building a legacy, and I did it with her by my side, quietly, humbly, while you all laughed, while you called her worthless. He turned his gaze on my father. You drag her in front of strangers. Called her a curse. But the only curse in this family is you. You could hear a pin drop. My father looked like he'd been gutted. His hands trembled. This is some trick, he muttered. You're lying. Jackson smiled. A slow, dangerous smile. Then let's make it public, shall we? He waved his hand. A man in a headset rolled in a TV screen. Another opened a laptop. Seconds later, photos, videos, documents, articles, proof flashed across the screen. Me at charity galas. Me at investor meetings. Me holding Jackson's hand on private airstrips. Legal marriage records. Business co-founder contracts. A press draft set for tomorrow. Whittaker daughter secretly married billionaire. New power couple emerges. The truth wasn't coming. It was already here. And every single person in that ballroom had to watch. I turned back to the mic, looked at my stunned relatives. My shaking father. My mother, too shocked to blink. And softly said, I forgive you. But you were wrong. About everything. But I wasn't done. Not even close. Because what Jackson revealed next left them breathless. The screen behind us kept flashing. Every new image slammed harder than the last. There I was at a tech summit in Dubai, sitting beside Jackson. There we were at a children's hospital gala in Miami. Here, a Forbes headline. The mystery woman behind Hailtech's rapid rise, uncovered. Every time a new photo appeared, the air in the ballroom got colder. People who once laughed were now frozen. And my father. He looked like the floor had cracked beneath him. But Jackson wasn't done. He held my hand and turned to face the crowd. I didn't come here to embarrass anyone, he said, his voice calm, deep, and echoing off the chandeliers. But today I watched the woman I love, the woman who's helped me build everything I own, be dragged onto a stage and humiliated by the very people who should have protected her. He stared at my father. You asked what she contributed to your family, Jackson continued. Let me answer that. She paid off your second mortgage 5 years ago. Gasps. My father flinched. She anonymously funded Olivia's wedding dress through a shell account because your business card got declined at the boutique last month. My sister's face drained of color. And that internship you bragged about to all your friends, Harold? The one that got your niece into Parsons. Jackson said with a raised brow. Yeah. That was me. Through her. Dead silence. The kind of silence that suffocates. I could feel their shame now, the way it crawled into their posture, made their eyes drop, their mouths shut. My mom opened her lips like she wanted to speak, but she couldn't find a single word. And then Jackson reached into his pocket and pulled out a single folded piece of paper. He handed it to me. Go ahead, he whispered gently. My hands didn't shake as I opened it. It was a deed, a property transfer. I blinked. Read again. I looked at my father and said, You remember the Whitaker estate? He didn't reply. Grandpa left it to you. You sold it when your debt collectors showed up. That land's been sitting there, empty until now. He nodded warily. I bought it, I said, voice firm. And last month, we started construction. He frowned. Construction? Jackson stepped in. We're turning it into a foundation center. Her foundation. A school and a resource center for underprivileged girls. My father opened his mouth, but I cut him off. You said I was the reason this family failed, I said softly. But all I did was try to help. Quietly. Because I knew you'd never admit needing me, or that I was worth anything. The crowd watched in stunned silence. No one dared move. And now, I continued, I don't need your validation. Or your name. Because I've already built something better. My mother finally stepped forward. Emily, she said, her voice dry. Why didn't you tell us? I looked at her without anger. Only clarity. Because you didn't want to know, I said. You were too busy being ashamed of me. Olivia took a step forward now, her voice cracking slightly. You really married Jackson Hale? I nodded. She swallowed. But why didn't you tell us? Jackson answered for me. Because none of you ever asked who she really was, he said coldly. You just judged. You assumed. And you laughed. Then he turned to me, touched my face gently. You don't owe them anything. But if you want to leave, say the word. I looked out at the room. At all the people who called me useless, invisible, pathetic. At the cousins who mocked me, the aunts who whispered about me like I was diseased. I said, I'll stay. But only to make one final announcement. The mic buzzed slightly. I cleared my throat. Starting next month, we'll be launching 3 scholarship programs through the Hale Foundation, I said. One of them is reserved for girls who were discarded by their own families. Girls who were told they weren't good enough. I looked directly at my mother. It'll be named the Vivian Fund. Not because of you, but in spite of you. She looked like she might cry. But she didn't. She stood still, quietly unraveling. I looked at my dad. I don't hate you, I said. But I'm done letting you define me. And with that, I turned to Jackson, took his arm, and walked down the stage. But before we reached the doors, someone fell to their knees. Then another. Then another. Within seconds, the entire front row, my family, cousins, guests, were kneeling. Not in reverence. In regret. Because they knew. Everything had changed. And I? I was finally free. The ballroom lights flickered gently as we stepped off the stage. The weight of silence lingered like fog, thick and unmoving, even as guests shifted awkwardly in their chairs, unsure whether to applaud, cry, or simply disappear. I didn't look back. Jackson's arm was steady beneath my hand, his presence a calming force in the eye of a storm I had endured for years. Together, we walked out the same gilded doors I'd entered through an hour earlier, but the girl who walked in wasn't the woman walking out. Outside, the wind was sharp. A Rolls-Royce Phantom sat at the curb, engine humming. Jackson opened the door for me. I turned to him before stepping inside. "I'm not angry," I whispered. "I know," he said. "But they needed to see it. All of it." I nodded. "I didn't do this to humiliate them." "You didn't." His voice was firm. "You told the truth. They humiliated you. All you did was finally let them see who you are." We drove in silence for a while, the city lights brushing across the windshield like gentle reminders of freedom. My phone buzzed. Dozens of missed calls, messages, apologies, explanations, excuses. I silenced it. I wasn't interested in noise anymore. 2 days later, I returned to my small apartment, not the penthouse Jackson insisted we keep, but the quiet little space I'd furnished with my own money, built from the consulting gigs I took before the world knew who I was. I didn't need luxury to feel powerful. I needed peace. There was a knock at the door. I opened it. My sister stood there, no makeup, her designer blouse slightly wrinkled. Behind her, my mother waited awkwardly, arms crossed, not in anger, but discomfort. "Can we talk?" Olivia asked. I stepped aside. She didn't sit, just stood by the window. "I didn't know," she said. "You didn't want to," I replied, keeping my voice neutral. Olivia looked at me, her eyes raw. "I was jealous. You were always quiet, and I thought that meant weak. But that day when you stood on that stage, I realized I didn't even know you." I crossed my arms. "You laughed." She swallowed. "I'm sorry." Silence passed between us. A kind of silence where something shifts. My mother finally spoke. "Your father hasn't left the house since the wedding. He's ashamed." I looked at her. "He's ashamed," I repeated slowly. "And you?" She winced. I was wrong. That's all she said. No excuses. No explanations. Just 4 words I had waited a lifetime to hear. "You know what hurts?" I said quietly. "I didn't need your praise. I just wanted you not to be embarrassed of me." "I'm not," she said. I nodded. "It's a little late for that. But I don't hate you." They left shortly after. No big emotional scene. No hugs or tears. Just 2 women walking out of a door they had ignored for far too long. It was a beginning, maybe, but not a reset. Some wounds don't close with apologies. The next month, the foundation launched. We called it the Quiet Backbone Project, named for every woman who held her world together silently while being underestimated, mocked, or dismissed. The media went wild. Not because of the name, not even because of the press release, but because I made one decision no one saw coming. I invited my parents and Olivia to the opening gala, and they came. My father walked with a limp in his confidence, his shoulders drooping, but he came. My mother wore blue, her way of saying she was trying. Olivia didn't speak much, but she stood by my side when the ribbon was cut. When the cameras clicked, they captured something rare. A moment of fragile, imperfect redemption. Not full forgiveness, but the start of something less broken. And when I gave my speech, I didn't mention the wedding. I didn't talk about shame or betrayal or pain. I spoke of resilience, of kindness, of how power doesn't always roar. Sometimes it simply refuses to give up. And that was me, the girl once dragged on stage, the woman now standing on her own. And what Jackson whispered into my ear afterward, as the applause shook the room, was something I'll never forget. "This is only the beginning." And it was. Because the greatest revenge was never revenge at all. It was rebuilding my life, so well they had no choice but to respect it, even when they didn't understand it. 2 weeks after the gala, I visited the old Whitaker property. Construction was well underway, walls rising, blueprints pinned to temporary boards, the sound of progress filling the air where silence once lived. I stood near the edge of the lot, watching young workers in branded Hale foundation gear pour concrete and raise beams. Jackson had stayed behind that day. He wanted me to come alone, to see what I had built with my own strength. "You don't need me there," he said that morning. "This is your victory." I smiled at the thought. He always knew when to lead and when to step back. As I turned to leave, I saw a familiar figure slowly walking toward me. My father. Alone. No driver. No sunglasses to hide behind. Just him, in a faded blazer that didn't quite fit anymore. He stopped a few feet from me. "Emily," he said. His voice was softer than I'd ever heard it. "Dad," I replied. Not cold. Just honest. He looked at the construction site. "It's strange seeing it like this. It's going to be a school," I told him. "And a mentorship center. Free resources for girls who need guidance. Structure. Safety." He nodded. "I never knew you had this in you." I met his gaze. "You never looked." Silence. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, worn photograph. It was me, 7 years old, holding a science fair ribbon, grinning from ear to ear. "I kept this in my wallet," he said, "even when I forgot how proud I was of you." I didn't cry. I just took a deep breath. "You didn't forget, Dad. You chose not to remember." His eyes filled with tears. "I don't expect you to forgive me, but I needed you to know I see it now. Everything you did. Everything you are." I gave a small nod. "Thank you." We stood in silence for a minute, just watching the steel frame of the future being built. Then I said, "You should go, but I'm glad you came." He nodded, turned, and walked away. No dramatic scene. No hugs. Just a quiet, heavy goodbye that felt more real than anything we'd said in years. And for the first time in a long time, I felt light. Back at home that evening, Jackson was reading through reports when I walked in. He looked up, studied my face. "Did you get what you needed?" he asked. I nodded slowly. "Yeah." Not closure, but understanding. That's enough sometimes. He pulled me into a hug, and I sank into his arms, grateful, not just for him, but for the woman I'd become. Because I wasn't the failure they painted. I wasn't the quiet one who stayed in the background. I was the one who endured. And then rose. 6 months later, everything felt different, but not flashy or dramatic. Just quietly powerful. The school on the old Whitaker land was nearly complete. Applications for scholarships had doubled. And one day, as I walked the hallway of the center in progress, I saw something that made me stop. A young girl, maybe 13, stood by a poster titled "Dream Big Even If They Laugh." She turned when she saw me and smiled shyly. "Are you the one who started all this?" I knelt beside her. "Yeah. But so will you one day." Her eyes lit up and she whispered, "They said I'd never be anything." I smiled. So did they. And here we are. She hugged me before running off to join a small group of girls reviewing a workshop schedule. That moment alone was worth every scar my past left behind. That night, Jackson and I stood on the rooftop of our townhome. Nothing extravagant, just peaceful. He poured 2 glasses of wine. "To everything they didn't see in you," he said, raising his glass. "To everything they didn't want to see," I replied. We clinked glasses. "I'm proud of you," he said. "But more than that, I admire you." I smiled. "You saved me." He shook his head. "No, Em. You saved yourself. I just stood beside you while you did it." There were no more parties to crash. No more stages to be dragged onto. No one left to prove wrong. Because the truth had already done its job. My family didn't become perfect. My parents weren't reborn. But they changed slowly. They started attending events, donating in my name. Olivia eventually invited me to her baby shower, and for the first time, it wasn't out of guilt, it was real. I didn't forget what they did. But I didn't carry it anymore. And one day, While organizing a mentorship day, my father showed up quietly and left a note with the front desk. I read it alone that night. I couldn't see you clearly through my own failures. But now I see the light you've always carried. You didn't fail us, Emily. We failed you. That was the last letter I ever needed. The world would go on. The whispers would fade. And the people who once laughed? They now sent donations, wrote articles, held up signs that said, "Thank you, Emily." But I never did it for them. I did it for the quiet girl who stood on that stage, surrounded by 300 laughing people, and still had the courage to whisper, "You'll all regret this." And the real twist? I never wanted revenge. I wanted respect. And I earned it, without screaming, without cruelty, just by becoming unstoppable.